The first time I heard the word human, I was 12 cycles old and sitting in an oral history session at the Scribe Academy on Velmara Prime. Our instructor, a narrow-bodied Zenvari elder named Saru, who had 3 of his primary sensory stalks missing from a border skirmish he never talked about, had paused mid-lecture. He was telling us about the Silence Era, that 400-cycle stretch where galactic exploration had stalled, trade routes collapsed, and most outer rim communication had gone dark. He paused, and then very quietly, very deliberately, he said, "There is one species catalogued during the pre-silence expansion who has not been confirmed alive or dead." We all leaned forward. He looked at each of us for a moment, then he said, "Humans." The word felt strange. It was short by galactic naming standards. Most species had compound names, layered syllables, titles that reflected their world's geography or evolutionary origin. Humans, just 2 syllables, flat, almost ordinary. "Where are they from?" one of my classmates asked. "A small planet in the Sol system," Saru said. "Third orbit, they called it Earth." Someone else, "What happened to them?" And here is where Saru did something I had never seen him do before or after. He hesitated. Then he said, "The records are incomplete." Incomplete, that was the official answer. The records are incomplete. But that night, after Academy lights went down and we were supposed to be processing our lesson downloads, my dormitory neighbor, a sharp-minded Zenvari named Pale, leaned across the gap between our sleeping alcoves and whispered. I looked them up in the deep archive. And I whispered back. "The files are there," she said, "but they're sealed. Old era classification. You can see the title, though." "What does it say?" She paused, then, "Warning, Apex-class species. Engagement protocol, do not initiate without full fleet authorization." I stared at her for a moment. "For a myth," I said. She didn't answer. And that was the last time either of us talked about humans for 60 years. The station. Let me tell you about Verath Station, so you understand what was at stake. Verath wasn't a military installation. It wasn't a weapons research post or a border checkpoint. It was, fundamentally, a library. The largest mobile archival station in the known galaxy, a sprawling, layered structure about 11 kilometers from nose to stern, shaped vaguely like a crescent moon if a crescent moon had 17 secondary docking rings and processing towers that glowed amber in the dark. We archived everything: species documentation, planetary surveys, trade agreements, war crimes records, extinction events, cultural heritage transmissions. If it had happened in the galaxy and someone thought it was worth preserving, it came through Verath. We had a crew of about 4,000 at full capacity. Mostly Zenvari, but a rotating population of scholars, translators, and data couriers from 17 other species. We had minimal weapons systems, some point defense arrays that nobody had needed to use in my lifetime, and 2 escort corvettes that docked with us on a rotating schedule when we moved through contested sectors. We were not built for war, which is exactly why what happened was so extraordinary. The cycle it began, Galactic Standard 4477.9, late in the third watch. I was in the deep archive on Sublevel 12. Sublevel 12 was where we kept the sealed files. Not the exciting kind of sealed, the kind that means political embarrassment or classified trade intelligence. The genuinely old kind of sealed, pre-silence era. Records so old that some of the data formats required specialized translation engines just to open the index headers, let alone the contents. I was doing a routine integrity check, just making sure the storage matrices hadn't degraded, that the magnetic seals were holding, that nothing had been physically disturbed. Maintenance work. The kind of thing you assign to someone with seniority because they won't complain about the monotony. I was 3/4 through the check when I found it. Not the record itself, the gap. There was a sequence of files, roughly 47 individual records, in the H7734 section that had been moved, recently moved. The access timestamps were wrong. Someone had opened those files within the last 6 galactic days and transferred them to an external medium. I stared at the timestamp for a long time. Then I went upstairs and told my supervisor. My supervisor, a middle-aged Zenvari named Veth, looked at the access log I'd printed and then looked at me with an expression I can only describe as trying to decide how worried to be. "External transfer," he said. "Yes." "From the H7734 section." "Yes." He looked at the timestamp again. That's the human files." "I know." He set the printout down, picked it up again. "Who has access authorization for those files?" "According to the access registry, only the archive director and the Galactic Council liaison." I paused. Neither of them was aboard in the last 6 days. The director is on Velmara for the convocation, and the liaison isn't due back until next cycle. Veth sat very still for a moment. Then he said, "I'm going to contact station security. You go back to sub-level 12 and don't touch anything." I went back to sub-level 12. I did touch something. I know I shouldn't have. I know the protocol is to secure the area and wait. But I had spent 60 years wondering about that sealed file, and the gap in the archive sequence was like a missing tooth in my own mouth. I couldn't stop probing it. I ran a secondary check. A deep check, the kind that takes 3 minutes and pulls ghost data remnants from the matrix buffers. And in the ghost data, the fragments of information that linger in storage even after a file has been moved, like an echo, I found a single sentence. Just one. Part of a larger document, clearly. A summary line, maybe, or a warning header. Just 11 words in Old Standard Galactic. Species H7734 is not extinct. They have been waiting. I remember my hands on the console. I remember the hum of the archive matrices around me. I remember thinking, waiting for what? And then the station alarms went off. The signal. Not a breach alarm, not a collision warning. The sound that came through Verath's PA system in those first seconds was a contact tone, a first contact protocol signal, which almost nobody alive had ever heard outside of training simulations. It's a specific sequence. 3 long tones, 2 short, designed to be distinct from every other alarm type, designed to be unmistakable. I had heard it in academy training. We all had. We'd practiced the response protocols, done the drills, learned the 11 steps of first contact procedure that any crew member might be needed to execute. But training simulations use a softer version, a gentler version. The real signal, the one that meant an unknown vessel had appeared on sensors within contact range and had broadcast the galactic standard greeting pulse. That one was louder. It filled the entire sublevel. It bounced off the metal walls. It seemed to vibrate in my chest. I stood up. The ghost data sentence was still on my console screen. Species H7734 is not extinct. They have been waiting. I turned and ran for the lift. By the time I reached the main observation deck, which was not where my station protocol said I should be in a contact event, but I was a 73-cycle-old archive scribe, and I had perhaps stopped fully complying with every protocol directive some years back. The deck was already crowded. Crew members pressed against the viewport panels, scholars who had sprinted from their research bays, 2 off-duty security officers who'd forgotten their sidearms in their rush. And through the viewport, ships. I counted 7 before I stopped counting. They were not like anything in the archive catalog, and I want you to understand what that means. I had read the archive catalog. I had processed entries on 462 distinct intelligent species and their corresponding spacecraft designs. I had cross-indexed hull configurations, drive signatures, atmospheric entry profiles. These ships didn't match anything. They were dark, almost perfectly dark, a shade of non-reflective black that made them look like holes cut in the star field. Their shapes were angular, aggressive, with hard geometry that suggested no concern whatsoever for conventional aerodynamics. They had no visible engine exhausts, no running lights, no docking indicator signals. They had simply appeared on our sensors, full stop. No approach vector, no deceleration signature, no drive wake. They had just been there, and then they had been here. "What are they?" someone beside me whispered. And an old Zenvari scholar named Rien, who had been studying pre-silent civilizations for his entire career, and who I had never once seen express strong emotion about anything, said in a voice that was barely holding itself together, "That's a human formation." Silence. "Then humans are a myth." "No," Rien said, "they are not." The first communication. The communication came 4 minutes after the ships appeared. It didn't come through our standard receiver arrays. It came through the emergency frequency, the galactic-wide broadcast band that was reserved for distress signals and war declarations. That alone made half the observation deck take a step back. The voice that came through, and it was a voice, actual vocalization, not the pulse transmission that most modern species used for long-range communication, was deep and even, calm in a way that felt almost wrong, given the circumstances. It spoke in Standard Galactic. Perfect Standard Galactic. No accent, no dialect drift, no processing artifacts from a translation system, just clear, clean, native fluency Standard Galactic. "This is Commander Vace Harlan of the UES Undying. We are broadcasting on emergency frequency to all vessels and installations in this sector. This message is intended for the occupants of the archive station designated Verath." A pause. "We understand you are conducting a routine archival mission. We are not here for you. However, we require immediate access to your station's external docking ring 7. We are escorting a priority asset that needs to be out of open space within the next 22 minutes. Another pause, shorter. "If you require confirmation of our identity, check your sealed archive files. Section H, 7734. The access code we used to retrieve copies 6 days ago was the one provided to us by your own Galactic Council. We are not trespassers. We are the people your council has been hoping would come back. If you allow us to dock and provide protection for the next 6 hours, no harm will come to your station or your crew. We give you our word. If you do not allow us to dock..." A pause. "Well, let's not go down that path. Humans are very bad at losing things we've decided to protect, and we've decided to protect the contents of that ship." A brief pause. "You have 4 minutes to respond." Static. The observation deck was completely silent for what felt like a very long time. Then Director Yuven, who had apparently cut short his Velmara trip and was now on the bridge via remote relay, his image projected on the main communication screen, said, "Open docking ring 7. His second-in-command, a competent but chronically cautious Zenvari named Pilith, said, "Director, we have no verification." "I have verification," Yuven said quietly. His projected image looked tired, deeply tired in a way that had nothing to do with the time of cycle. "I gave them the access code myself, 6 days ago. Open ring 7. Pilith stared at the director's image. Then he turned to the docking control station and said, "Open ring 7. The DOCKING. I should not have been in the docking observation gallery. My station was the Deep Archive. In any emergency protocol, Archive staff were supposed to shelter in the interior sections, away from the hull, away from airlocks, away from any interface point with the outside world. I went to the docking observation gallery anyway. I was not the only one. There were about 40 of us pressed against the reinforced viewport that looked down into Ring 7's pressurization corridor. Scholars, junior crew, 2 people who I was fairly sure were supposed to be in the infirmary, everyone wanting to see. The ship that entered Ring 7 was smaller than the 7 I'd seen outside. A transport, maybe, or a heavy shuttle, still dark as deep space, still angular. It moved with eerie precision, no thruster corrections, no wobble, no drift. It slid into the docking corridor like it had done this 10,000 times, which for all I knew it had. The docking clamps engaged. The airlock cycles ran their standard sequence: pressure equalization, atmospheric confirmation, structural seal verification. Then the inner door opened. 6 of them came through first. I know the number because I counted, because my brain needed something to do that wasn't simply panicking. 6 humans, walking in 2 columns of 3. Moving with a coordination that didn't require any visible signal or communication. They just moved together, spacing themselves with instinctive precision, eyes sweeping the corridor in overlapping arcs. They were wearing armor. Not the ceremonial kind that the Galactic Council's honor guards wore, not the decorative kind. This was functional armor, dark, matte-finished plates over some kind of underlayer that moved with them like a second skin. It covered them from neck to foot. Their helmets were sealed, visors down, and whatever the visor material was, it didn't reflect the docking corridor's lights. They were carrying weapons. I am not a weapons scholar. I don't catalog armaments. But I know the difference between a ceremonial sidearm and something that has been built with the specific intention of ending things quickly and efficiently. What these humans were carrying fell firmly into the second category. Long-form weapons, 2 of them braced across their chests, 4 with them held low and ready, barrels pointing at the floor in a way that felt less like caution and more like they were choosing not to aim yet. They fanned out into the corridor. 2 went to the far end, 2 covered the side passages, 2 stayed at the airlock. And then a 7th human walked through. No armor. A coat, long, dark, some kind of heavy material. No weapon visible, though I'd have been genuinely surprised if there wasn't one somewhere. A face I could actually see, which in that moment felt startlingly strange after 6 sealed visors. She was, I struggle with human age estimation. I'll admit that up front, but she had the look of someone for whom time had been eventful rather than simply passing. Lines around eyes that were a light brown color, the kind that look quiet right up until they're looking directly at you and you realize they're not quiet at all. Short hair, dark with silver through it. She looked up at the observation gallery. Looked directly at the viewport. I am aware that the viewport was one way from inside the corridor. She should not have been able to see us. She looked directly at me, or at least it felt that way, and her expression was completely unreadable. Then she looked back at the corridor and said something in a language I didn't recognize, rapid, compressed syllables that sounded like it had been designed for efficiency rather than elegance. And 2 of the armored humans turned and went back through the airlock. They came back carrying something. A container, large, roughly 2 meters long, 1 meter wide, sealed with multiple layers of locks and what appeared to be biometric confirms. Black, like everything else they'd brought with them. They carried it between them with extraordinary care. I found out later what was in the container. I'll get to that. First, I need to tell you about the Gorvathi. The monsters. There is a species in the Outer Rim that the Galactic Council's public communications describe as aggressive opportunists with limited territorial ambition. This is what you say about the Gorvathi when you want to avoid causing a panic. What the sealed files say, the ones in the deep archive, the ones I'd been checking for integrity all those years, is considerably different. The Gorvathi are not limited in their territorial ambition. They are patient, extraordinarily patient. They identify a target, a station, a colony, a ship, and they study it, sometimes for years. They watch the patrol schedules, the maintenance cycles, the crew rotation patterns, the defensive response times. They learn everything there is to know. And then they move. When the Gorvathi move, they move with everything. Not a probe force, not a scouting party. Everything. Full commitment, full attack, with the complete understanding that if they have done their homework correctly, resistance will collapse within the first 4 minutes and everything after that is just collection. They had been watching Varath Station for, according to what I later pieced together from our own sensor archive logs, approximately 14 months. They knew our patrol schedules. They knew our defensive response times. They knew we had 2 escort corvettes that rotated out every 12 days, and that there was a 4-hour window between the old escort departing and the new one arriving. They had chosen their moment with characteristic patience. They hit us 40 minutes after the human ships appeared. I felt the first impact before I heard the alarm. A deep structural thud, the kind that travels through metal and floor and up through your feet before your ears register anything. The kind that your body understands before your brain does. Then the collision alarm. Then the breach alarm. Then, about 3 seconds later, the combat station's alert, which Varath Station had not activated in my entire career. The lights shifted from standard amber to emergency red. In the docking corridor below the observation gallery, the 6 armored humans reacted before the first alarm had finished its second cycle. No hesitation, no looking around, no moment of what was that confusion. They simply moved into positions that clearly made tactical sense, even though I couldn't have explained the logic at the time. 2 to cover the airlock. 2 to flank positions at the corridor bends. 2, including the one without armor, seemed to be communicating rapidly with the suits of the others. The 7th human, the woman in the long coat, pressed 2 fingers to her ear. "Harlan," she said, "we've got incoming. How many?" I couldn't hear the reply, but her expression shifted, and I want to be precise about this, because it's the detail that stuck with me most clearly. Her expression didn't show fear. It showed something more like calculation. Like her brain was already 3 steps ahead of the situation and was just confirming data points. She said, "Gorvathi." "Of course it's Gorvathi." A pause. "How long do we have before they try to board?" Another pause. 8 minutes. Her eyes moved around the corridor. "All right, Harlan, I need Ring 7's external airlock locked down from your side. No one else gets in or out of this corridor except through me. Can you do that?" Pause. "Good, I'll tell the station commander." She lowered her hand from her ear and looked up at the observation gallery again. This time she spoke in standard galactic, directly to the viewport. "I know you're up there," she said. "Whoever is listening, I need to speak with whoever commands this station. Now, not in 5 minutes, now." The commander. Her name was Dr. Kale Myros. Not a military title, doctor, a research designation. She was, it turned out, a xenobiologist, which struck nearly everyone on Varath's crew as an extraordinary person to have commanding the situation on their station. I learned this because I was one of the 3 people our acting station commander sent down to meet her in the docking corridor. Our acting commander, a practical-minded Zenvari named Sale who had been on the bridge when Director Yuven's remote connection dropped during the attack's sensor disruption, had apparently decided that sending me and 2 of my senior archive colleagues was a reasonable choice. I think she sent archivists because she thought we were less likely to do something that would start a war with the humans. She may have been right. The docking corridor was cold when we came down through the internal access hatch. The attack on the station's outer sections had disrupted some of the environmental control, and the temperature had dropped several degrees. My breath fogged slightly. Dr. Myros turned to face us as we came in. Close up, the quietness in her eyes was even more distinct. She looked at each of us with complete attention, the kind of attention that makes you feel simultaneously seen and assessed. "You're from the archive," she said. "Yes," I said. "I'm Elder Scribe Talon. These are my colleagues. Acting Commander Sale sent us to." "Good," she said. "You can answer the question I actually need answered. The container we brought on board," she gestured to the black case, which two of the armored humans were now positioned beside with a very specific kind of alertness. "Do you know what it contains?" I looked at the case. "No." "Do you know what section H-7734 in your archive covers?" "The human files, yes." Something in her expression shifted very slightly, but I caught it. "How much of it have you actually read?" "None of it. It's sealed." It was sealed. She reached into her coat and produced a small data chip. "It's not anymore. These are the relevant records, the ones that tell you what's in that container and why the Gorvathi are currently trying to blow holes in your station to get to it." She held the chip out to me. "I need you to understand what you're helping us protect, because in about 4 minutes, my people are going to be defending this corridor, and I want at least one person on the station to know why." I took the chip. "Tell me first," I said. She looked at me for a moment. Then she said, "It's a child." The archive opens. I will not reproduce the entire contents of the H-7734 file sequence here. That is a task for the formal archivist and the Galactic Council's Historical Commission, and it will take them years to fully process. But I will tell you what Dr. Myros told me in those 4 minutes, because it is the context without which nothing that followed makes any sense. Humans disappeared from the galactic community 400 years ago. Not gradually. Not through extinction or war or disease. They made a decision. A collective, species-wide decision, communicated through the Galactic Council of that era, filed in the appropriate records, and then executed with characteristic human thoroughness. They withdrew. The reasons were complex. Dr. Myros summarized them with an efficiency that suggested she'd been over this history many times. We looked at where the galaxy was going. We saw the Gorvathi expanding. We saw 3 other apex predator species in early-stage territorial expansion. We saw a galactic council that was moving toward diplomacy and managed coexistence as its primary strategy for all threats. She said it without inflection, stating facts. We disagreed with that strategy. A pause. We've always been very clear-eyed about one particular truth. Some things don't stop because you talk to them. Some threats have to be met with force, or they don't stop. And we decided we weren't going to pretend otherwise to make the council comfortable. "So you left," I said. "We left. We spent 400 years not leaving, actually 400 years working, building, developing," she glanced at the container, "and researching." "The child," I said. "The child," she confirmed, "who is not precisely a child in the way you're thinking." She explained. Humans, it turned out, had spent their 4 centuries of withdrawal doing something the rest of the galaxy had considered impossible, developing a stable interface between human biology and Gorvathi neurological architecture. The Gorvathi communicated through a biological network, a species-wide distributed consciousness that coordinated their tactics, their resource allocation, their territorial decisions. It was the reason they were so effective. They didn't need commanders because they didn't have individuals in the way most species did. Each Gorvathi was a node in a network that processed information collectively. It also meant they had a collective vulnerability, one that humans had spent a very long time learning how to access. The child in the container, and Dr. Myros had used the word advisedly. I understood, because the entity inside was young in some meaningful sense, even if it was not young in the way I was imagining, was the result of that research. A biological construct, human genetics combined with synthesized Gorvathy neural architecture, capable of interfacing with the Gorvathy network at a fundamental level. Not to communicate with them. To disrupt them. They know what it is, Dr. Myros said. That's why they're here. Someone told them we haven't found the leak yet, but someone told them we were moving it, and where, and when. Her jaw tightened slightly. And now the Gorvathy have committed a full attack force to destroying it before we can deploy it. Deploying it, I said carefully. What does that mean? She looked at me steadily. It means the Gorvathy network goes dark, permanently. Not every individual member, the network, the collective intelligence. They'd be reduced to individuals, functioning individuals capable of survival but no longer coordinated, no longer capable of the strategic, patient predation that makes them a threat. I processed this for a moment. You're going to end the Gorvathy as a military force. Yes. Using a child. Using a willing participant who has been raised with complete understanding of what they are and what they'll do, and who made their own choice about this mission. Her voice was level. I know how it sounds. I'm not asking you to be comfortable with it. I'm asking you to help me keep them alive for the next 6 hours. The station shook again. Harder this time. One of the armored humans, the one positioned at the corridor's far bend, turned and said something in that rapid human language, and Dr. Myros responded immediately. Then to me, they're cutting through the outer hull, Section 14. That gives us 11 minutes before they reach an access corridor. She looked at my 2 colleagues, then at me. I need to know the station's internal layout, every access corridor that connects to Ring 7, every emergency seal, every maintenance shaft, every passage a body could fit through. She said it without any particular urgency in her tone, which somehow made it more urgent. Can you get that for me? I am an archive scribe. I know Verath Station's blueprints the way I know my own script. Every level, every corridor, every service shaft and emergency access hatch. Yes, I said. Then let's go, she said. And she turned toward the container, put one hand briefly on its surface, a gesture so small and so human that it caught in my chest, and then she looked at her 6 armored companions. She said one word in their language. They all moved. The defense. What followed over the next 3 hours and 47 minutes is not something I can describe in perfect linear order. I was moving through the station. Information was fragmentary. I was getting reports through my communicator from crew members in other sections, relaying corridor layouts to Dr. Myros' team, trying to simultaneously keep track of where the Gorvathy were breaching and where the human defensive positions were being set up. But I can tell you what I saw. The Gorvathy boarders came through Section 14 first, as predicted, then through the maintenance junction at Level 6, then through an emergency access hatch near the communications array that I honestly hadn't thought anything could fit through. Gorvathy are not large by galactic standards. They are roughly the same height as an average Zinvari, and their bodies are lean, built for speed rather than mass. What makes them terrifying is not their physical presence. It is the coordination. The silent, flawless, never hesitating coordination of a species that doesn't have to communicate to act together. They moved through the station in patterns that adapted in real time. When one route was blocked, others shifted without any signal, without any delay. When a distraction was created in one section, pressure increased in 3 others simultaneously. They moved like water finding cracks in a container. The 6 armored humans moved like they had been designed specifically to deal with water. I saw the first engagement from a secondary corridor observation camera. I was in the station's auxiliary control room with Acting Commander Sale and 2 of her crew, managing the emergency SEAL sequences and keeping communication open with Dr. Myros. 4 Gorvathi had come through the Level 6 breach and were moving toward Ring 7 through Corridor 11. 2 of the armored humans were in Corridor 11. The engagement was over in less than 20 seconds. I want to be careful about how I describe this, because I am aware that what I am about to say sounds like the kind of thing you would find in a very dramatic entertainment broadcast rather than a genuine historical account. But I am a trained archival scribe. Precision in observation is my professional discipline. The 2 humans didn't wait for the Gorvathi to reach them. They didn't find cover. They moved toward the Gorvathi with a quality of intention that was unlike anything I had ever seen in a defensive engagement. The weapons they carried made almost no sound. A low, compressed discharge, nothing like the loud beam weapons the station's point defense arrays used, nothing like the sonics the Gorvathi used. Quiet and precise. 3 of the 4 Gorvathi were down before the 4th had processed what was happening. The 4th was fast, they always are, and it changed direction, went for the wall, tried to find a different angle. One of the humans was already at that angle. The 4th Gorvathi went down. The 2 humans moved forward, checked the corridor, communicated something brief, and continued toward the next reported incursion point. The whole thing lasted, I said, less than 20 seconds. Commander Sale, watching on the same camera feed, said nothing for a moment. Then she said, "The files in the archive. Section H7734, the warning." "Yes," I said. "Apex class species." "Yes." She watched the camera feed. The corridor was clear. I spent 60 years thinking humans were a myth. So did I. She looked at me. I almost wish they still were. I understood what she meant, not because the humans frightened me, but because something about watching those 2 figures move through the corridor with that calm, efficient, total competency made me feel the weight of 400 years of their absence, and understand, viscerally, what the galaxy had been.